Hello, welcome back everyone. In my previous video, I have already discussed on Python Pandas series. So in this video, I will discuss on Python Pandas data frame, which is one of the most important data structure of Python Pandas. So before moving ahead, let us understand what a data frame is or what a pandas data frame is. A data frame is a two-dimensional data structure that is data is aligned in a tabular fashion in rows and columns. So whenever we talk about rows and columns, we understand that it is in a tabular format. So we can understand this as follows. Let us take an example of the spreadsheet. A spreadsheet, what it does, it contains multiple rows and multiple columns. So those multiple rows and multiple columns togetherly form a table. So this is what a table means. In data frame, we basically deal with data which are in the format of which we present in the format of rows and columns. So data frame is aligned in a tabular fashion in rows and columns. So what are the features of data frame? Let us understand that. Let us understand the features of data frame. Potentially, columns are of different types, size are mutable, labeled axes, rows and columns can perform arithmetic operation on rows and columns. Potentially, columns are of different types. What does it mean? Like, we can segregate those columns whenever we need. Like, all the columns of data frame are of different types and they are different from each other. Like, each and every column has their own identity, and the size of a data frame is always immutable. Like, we can manipulate the size of a data frame, and we can also label the axes. Like, again, moving back to this spreadsheet, we can see that we have axes of letters and we have axes of numbers. So we know that we can change the name of the axis as per our need. So right now this column names is in the axis A. So if we want, we can shift this to axis B. The same thing can be done in data frame as well. Like, we need not to change, or we need not to move the axis, we need not to move the column from one axis to another or one column to another, but rather we can just simply change the name or simply change the label name. It is also easy to perform calculation on data frame rows and column, like we perform the calculations in spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheets. So this is the basic structure of a data frame. Like, as I said, it consists of rows and columns. As we can see, these are the rows that you can see here. So this rows and this column togetherly form a table, and this kind of structures in Python pandas are known as data frame. So this entire thing is the data frame, which consists of rows and columns. Let us understand the basic syntax of the data frame and how to call a data frame method. Like, this is the basic syntax how you can call it data frame method. So we have to use the pandas module, pandas dot data frame. Like, we have to pass the following parameters over here. As you can see, the data is the first parameter, index is the second parameter, columns is the third, fourth the data type, and the copy. Like, if we want to copy, we have to pass it true. If we don't, we have to pass it false. The data is the primary parameter that we need to pass, which consists the data and the index, like what the index number should be. If we want to manipulate the index number, then we can pass the index and as well as the columns. And if the column name are not set, then we can set the column names. So in that cases, we can use these columns. So this is the basic syntax of data frame. In order to use data frame, we have to follow this particular syntax. Like, we have to pass at least one parameter, like the data, in order to create a data frame. So let us understand the parameters, or each and every single parameters, in a much more better way in order to understand what a data frame actually means. So the data is the basic data that we pass in the data frame in order to make the frame, to form that particular row column structure, as we can see, we need to have this data. Like I have names from 1 to 9 and marks from 30 to 38. I need to have this data in order to form a data frame. Without this data I cannot form a data frame. So in data frame, what we have to do is we need to pass the data. So this is the data that we pass in the data frame. So the data frame data can be of n dimensional array, numpy array, series, map, list, dictionaries, constant, and much more. So next is the index. Index is basically the index. As we know, the index number, the index starts from 0 in Python. We have already discussed about that in series. So we can also pass the indexes in data frame. Talking about columns, columns are basically these columns. As we can see in this particular table, we have two columns. This is serial number and this is parameter and description. So we can also name the column names using the parameter columns. Data type is used to set the data type. As you can see, data type of each column can also be set. Like if you want to set the data type of the first column as int 64, that also can be done, and the second column is float, that also can be done. So we can also manipulate the data type using the fourth parameter that is used to set the data type, and the fifth parameter is the copy. So copy parameter is used to copy a data from one data frame to another. By default it is false, so it can be used if you want to copy a data frame from one frame to another. I hope this is clear. This is the basic syntax that we'll be using in our code in order to create a data frame. So this syntax is very important. Please understand this syntax very carefully. Pandas.dataframe accepts 5 parameters. Those 5 parameters are data, index, columns, data type, and copy. So this is the basic structure or the basic syntax of data frame. I hope this is clear. If this is clear, then we can proceed further. Like you can understand how a data frame is being created with an example. So this is an example of a basic data frame program. What it does, it creates an empty data frame. As you can see, first what I have done is I have imported pandas as PD. After that I have created a data frame object, and inside the data frame what I have done, I have created an empty data frame, and inside that empty data frame I have not passed anything or any data. So as soon as I run this program, the output of the program is as follows. So it says empty data frame. Empty data frame is been shown here with no columns and no indexes. So this is a basic example of how to create a data frame. So this is some of the ways by which we can create a data frame. So we can create data frame using list, we can create data frame using dictionary, we can create data frame using series, we can create data frame using numpy and dimensional array, and we can also create data frame using another data frame. So let's move ahead and look into some example. In this example, what I have done is I've created an object named data and I have stored values from 1 to 5. So this is a list kind of object and it stores values from 1 to 5, and I have passed this data inside the data frame and I have printed that data frame object. So let's execute the code and let's see what is the output. As you can see, this is the output of the code. It prints the data and the index numbers and the corresponding index numbers. So here 0 is basically the column number and this is the index numbers. So moving back to our basic definition that we have already gone through, that is column. The column in the column syntax, the value of the column starts from range n, that is it uses the syntax of np_arrange. So that's why here the column value starts from 0. So as soon as we move ahead, so it will go further, like 0 1 2 3 4. If we have multiple columns and we have not given the name of the columns, it will move ahead like 1 2 3 4 and so and so. So the column uses the syntax of np.arrange, and so do the index. So the index also uses the concept of np_arrange, like it starts from 0 to n-1, the number of values we have. If we don't set the index name, then it will start from 0 and print to n-1. So this was all about creating data frame using list. In the next example, we will see how to create data frame using nested list. So this is an example of creating data frame using nested list. In this example, what we have done is we have once again created an object named data, and we have stored list values like this is the first element of the list, this is the second element of the list, and this is the third element of the list. The second element of the list is once again a list. That's why we have said we have used the concept of nested list. It stores the value like the name, or it stores a string value, and it stores a numerical value. So the nested element, or the first element of the nested list, contains two values or two elements. One is string value, the other is the integer value. And the second element of the nested list again consists of the same pattern of values, string and numeric. And the third element of the list also consists of the same values, that is a string and numeric. So this way we have created a nested list, and we have passed this data inside the data frame, and what we have done is we have printed the data. So as soon as the code is being executed, what it does, it stores the data into two basic columns, like one column which in one column it prints all the name, and in the other column it prints all these numerical values. Let us assume that these are the marks of those students, Alex, Bob and Clark. So these are the marks of those three students, and in the first column what it does, it prints the name, and the second column what it does, it prints the marks. So let's execute this code and see what happens. As you can see, Alex, Bob and Clark gets printed along with their marks. So as I've said, the column index starts from 0 to n-1 using the concept of a range, and here the index value also gets printed. So let's see if I need to manipulate this index values as well as the column name. What we can do is we can follow the following pattern. Like, let's say I will create an object named index, and I will say a comma b comma c. So this is the index that I have created. So what I want to do is I will change the index from 0, 1 and 2 to a, b, c. So what I need to do is I need to pass the index after data. So comma index. So as soon as I pass the index, so the index will get manipulated. So this is the index list which I have passed. It is a list kind of object. So I have passed this along with data such that the default index number gets manipulated to a, b and c. So the index number has been manipulated from 0, 1 and 2 to a, b and c. This way we can change the index number, and let's say from 0 to 1, 0, 1, we want to change the column name as names and marks. This should be name, and this should contain the name, the column name as name instead of 0, and this should contain the column name as marks instead of 1. So that can also be done in data frame. So in order to do that, what I will do is I will create an object named call, and I will pass the first element as name, and I will pass the second element as, let's say, marks. So as soon as I pass it as a third parameter, what happens is the column name from 0 to 1 gets changed to name and marks. So let's execute this code. As you can see, the column name from 0 to 1 got changed to name and marks. So this way we can manipulate the column name in data frame. So this was all about manipulating index and columns of data frame. In the next video we will see some more examples of data frame. Thank you.